Production and distribution of City Club forums on ideastream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Robert Conrad, Cleveland State University, the Chautauqua Institution, the Payne Fund, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Rick Jackson, senior host and producer at ideastream. I'm pleased to introduce today's debate between the two final candidates for the mayor of Cleveland seat, Frank G. Jackson and Zack Reed. I think everybody knows both men here, but let me remind you a few biographical details. Frank G. Jackson was elected in 2005. He is Cleveland's 57th mayor and is seeking his fourth four-year term. If elected, he would become Cleveland's longest-serving mayor. He began his public service career as an assistant city prosecutor in the Cleveland Municipal Court's office, the clerk. From 1990 through 2005, Mr. Jackson served on Cleveland City Council. He was representing the central neighborhood and other parts of Cleveland's east side. Zack Reed has served as a City of Cleveland council member for Ward 2 since 2001. He began his public service career coordinating a jobs program for youth through the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Mr. Reed then worked on public housing initiatives for the city of San Francisco before returning to Cleveland to work for Cuyahoga County's Children and Family Services. Now here's how the debate will flow. We'll start with questions from me, then move to questions from representatives from local media. We have here today Amy Eddings, the host of WCPN's Morning Edition, Russ Mitchell, the anchor for WKYC Television, and Chris Quinn, the president and editor of Advance Ohio, or Cleveland.com. Candidates will have 90 seconds to respond to questions directed at that candidate. The other candidate would then have 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Some questions will be directed to both candidates. Each would then have 90 seconds to respond. We will work diligently to ensure equal speaking time for each of the candidates. Now, the second half of the debate is comprised of questions from the audience. Then at the end of the audience Q&A, I'll have a final question for the candidates. Throughout the debate, candidates will be notified when they have 15 seconds remaining and when their time is concluded. So with that, let's begin. In lieu of opening statements, the first question, without mentioning your opponent. Come Election Day, Mr. Mayor, why should voters light up that box next to your name?
Because this is about the future of the city of Cleveland. You know, contrary to what some people say, I believe Cleveland has a bright future, it has a good future. But as you know, in life, nothing's guaranteed. You have to work on it. And we've spent the last 12 years working so that we could be in the position of having a good and a bright future. And the next term will be one of ensuring and guaranteeing and completing some things that we've begun, whether it's our education reform, our development activity, neighborhood development, safety, the reform that we have in safety, those kinds of things that are essential to moving a city forward in order to guarantee the basics of quality life and prosperity and standard of living for everyone. You know, I often say that a great city is measured by what we do for the least of us. And I'm not talking about welfare and charity. We are talking about how is everyone included in that prosperity and in that quality of life. So my next term will be about completion of what we already begun. We've reached that point where now we can have the inclusion of everyone into that prosperity and quality of life.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Reed, same thing. Without talking about him, why should we vote for you?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to be in this free speech forum here. It's always good to be here at the City Club, which I've been a member for an awful long time, and I appreciate that very much. People should vote for me on Election Day on November the 7th, simply because we can't go through 4 more years of the same old rhetoric that we just heard a second ago. There have been 3 things that have been constant since this administration took office.
It's about you, it's not about him.
It's about the fact, well, it's about me. I'm saying if you elect me on election day, we're going to stop being in double-digit poverty. We're going to stop having double-digit unemployment. We're going to stop neglecting the neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland. And we're going to stop this crime that continues to ravage every ward, every neighborhood, and every community in the city of Cleveland. When you elect me mayor of the city of Cleveland, you have a safer city. And a safer city means a city that's going to be thriving with jobs, economic opportunities, and for our young people to grow up like I did. When my mom took us from 69th in Euclid to 139th in Kinsman, to Mount Pleasant. And we thought when we moved from 69th in Euclid to 139th in Kinsman, we were like the Jeffersons. We thought we were moving on up. Look at our wards today, and look at our neighborhoods today. On November the 7th, that will change when the people of the city of Cleveland elect me the next mayor of the city of Cleveland.
Thank you, sir. Part of the reason the Division of Police is under a consent decree is because investigators found systemic overuse of force, including deadly force used on the mentally ill. Mayor Jackson, you had to watch the rules shift. What we thought was unacceptable to Barack Obama's Justice Department could be determined satisfactory under the Donald Trump administration. Could you please tell us if and why the consent decree process has been successful under your leadership?
Well, it has been successful. It's moving in the right direction. And one of the reasons why it's being successful is because we were working on different things before the consent decree. As a matter of fact, we were working with the U.S. Attorney's Office here in the Department of Justice on things, but we were doing them one thing at a time, incrementally. And whenever you do that, it doesn't catch hold. It has no sustainable effect because it stands out there by itself. So the consent decree, which I asked the Department of Justice to come in and review us, really gives us a holistic approach. So now we can make reform, and we can make it in a holistic way. And in that sense, we're able to move the Division of Police forward and move it forward in a way that we can see the results we need to see, because everything is tied to everything else, whether it's through training, the number of officers, the deployment of those officers, the equipment, the technology, all those kind of things that are necessary for a modern urban police division to be able to function in an urban setting. Because we're not a rural area, we're not a Mayberry kind of setting, we're an urban setting. So there has to be policing, but it has to be done in a constitutional and professional way.
Thank you. Mr. Reed, 30 seconds.
Well, I believe the federal government came in here because they can't believe what most people in the city of Cleveland can't believe. After the Eric Henderson situation when he got his eye socket kicked out, after the 137 shots, and after Tamir Rice, two men still stay there, McGrath and Flass, and not only do they stay there, they got promoted. You understand? The debacle within the safety department, these two individuals got promoted instead of getting fired. That's why they're here.
Thank you. I'll have more questions later. We will turn over to our panel of journalists now who have additional questions. First up is Russ Mitchell of WKYC Television.
Rick, thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mayor, Councilman.
Good afternoon.
5 Cleveland police officers involved in the 2012 police chase and shooting death of Timothy Russell and Melissa Williams were reinstated by an arbitrator this summer. And we learned today that earlier this month they were reinstated by Cleveland Police. Of course, this is a big victory for the Cleveland Police Patrolmen's Association, which fought hard to get these officers their jobs back. Councilman Reed, earlier this week you accepted the union's endorsement. Some people, many people, some were not happy about that. Do you think these officers should have been reinstated? And what do you think about these officers possibly being back on the street at some point if they aren't already?
One thing that I did when I became a councilman of the city of Cleveland, I raised my right hand to uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Ohio, and the Charter of the city of Cleveland. It means I have to follow the law. And in an arbitrary situation, in a situation that was where the mayor and the safety and the police force sat down and they worked out a contract. When they said they couldn't come to an agreement, they had to go to an arbitrator. They went to the arbitrator. The arbitrator agreed with the police. Now, I may not agree with what the decision was. I may not have made that decision. But when you raise your right hand to follow the law, you have to follow the law. When you sign your name on the contract that says if we don't agree, you have to go to an arbitrator, you have to go to the arbitrator. You can't willy-nilly make a decision like decisions like were made on Public Square that I'm gonna make a decision just because I'm the mayor of the city of Cleveland.
30 seconds left, but all due respect, I ask you what you think about it.
Well,
What do you
I
think
told you,
about
like, it doesn't matter what I think about it. It doesn't matter in the sense that as mayor of the city of Cleveland, I have to follow what was laid out. So I may not agree. There are many a times I didn't agree that police officers should have the right, or any city employee should have the right to not be in the residency law. But the Supreme Court of the state of Ohio agreed with that. We made a decision to go to and sign a contract, and the contract states when we don't agree, we got to go to an arbitrator. I may not agree with the arbitrator's decision.
Thank you. 30 seconds.
Well, it does matter what you think about it. You're supposed to be, you running for mayor, it does matter what you think about it. And not only that, it is a consistent pattern that you change what you think about things depending on which way the wind is blowing politically. So it does matter. It does matter what you think, and it does matter what you do. And it can't just change from here to there depending on which way the wind is blowing.
Amy Eddings.
I'm Amy Eddings, host of WCPN's Morning Edition. This is for both candidates. A recent study by Cleveland State University showed that auditors' valuation of properties in recent years has risen most dramatically in downtown Cleveland, University Circle, and the near West Side. On the premise that the time to address gentrification is before it gets going, what would you do in the next 4 years to foster much-needed development? That wasn't me. While making sure these communities are not resegregated by class or race. Mayor Jackson, I'll start with you.
Well, that's a very important question, and it's something that I've experienced and I've dealt with in the past when I was a councilman. You know, when I councilman of Central, and we had acres and acres of vacant land, they were doing new housing construction, new development, and people were paying property tax of couple of $100 a year after the new houses were built. Now they're paying $1,200 a year. Seniors on fixed income. So you have to make a really concerted effort and be intentional about that gentrification not occurring just because of development. So what we did, we got everyone who was eligible for homestead. We had them sign up for the homestead that would keep their property tax low. We worked with the administration, as a council, worked with the administration to do rehab of seniors' homes on the exterior, whether it was vinyl siding, a new roof, a porch, so that they would not be in some code violation. But it has to be a very intentional thing you have to do. The other side to that is that whenever there is construction going on or development going on, the people of the neighborhood have to be part of that, so that as those incomes are created, the people of the neighborhood should have a part of that income in order to help them be able to sustain themselves in that environment.
Councilman Reed,
Well, as you
what
know,
would you do?
Well, as you know, my good friend Matt Zone, Councilman Matt Zone, is now building condos that are, some are $1 million in his neighborhood. So things like that occur. And I'm glad now to hear the mayor now talks about the fact that people who live in the community should have the opportunity to participate in that revitalization, because that's what helps the most. When individuals are able to work on projects that they look out their door and see every single day, then they know that now they have the opportunity to maybe move into those new condos. They know that they now have the opportunity to participate in the revitalization. So you think about that now, we're talking about somebody who's changed their mind. This is someone who said for months that we didn't need new police. We didn't need more police. Now suddenly on this piece of literature, we need 300 brand new police officers. You look at what we're talking about now, we're talking about a city, 6.6% unemployment, the largest unemployment of any major metropolitan city in the United States of America, from Hawaii to Maine. So you just can't talk about these issues and just keep talking about the issues. After 12 years of seeing what has begun to happen, people in our community can no longer afford to stay in our community because they can't get the jobs they need. They can't be able to work on those jobs in their wards and their communities. On November the 7th, that changes when I'm elected mayor of the city of Cleveland.
Hi, I'm Chris Quinn from Cleveland.com, Advance, Ohio. As you know, there is perhaps no greater health crisis in Cleveland than lead poisoning. Large numbers of children are being tested for it and coming back positive. Without speaking to what's being done so far, which clearly isn't enough, what would you do in the next 4 years to greatly cut into this crisis? We'll start with you, Mr. Councilman Reed.
I'll
This
show a
is for
sense.
both candidates.
It's for both. Yeah.
I'll show a sense of urgency. I mean, this is not the federal government came in and said to the city of Cleveland, you're not doing enough. State government came in and showed us, you're not doing enough. It's a pattern under this administration to not show a sense of urgency. So you first got to you understand the mayor of the city of Cleveland is the second most powerful person in the great state of Ohio. So when he speaks or she speaks, people listen. So when you sit on the sidelines and let the lead crisis, and that's what it is now, get out of control, when the federal government has to step in and say you're not doing much, when the state government comes in and says you're not doing much, that's on his watch. So under my watch, we're going to make it one of the leading things that we have to do. Since I've been a councilman, they'll tell you, Councilman Joe Sipperman, we sat on the health committee together. I was the one when I left San Francisco. He told you when I was in San Francisco. So when I helped rebuild housing in San Francisco, California, one of the things that we had to do was remove the lead out of public housing. When I came back to Cleveland, I said, why are we removing the lead in public housing and not removing the lead from the house across the street? So you first got to use the power of the mayor's office to show that this is a crisis. And we're not going to continue to let our children be affected with this lead crisis, and we're going to do something about it. But not once, not twice, this administration is set on the sidelines, and now you see the harmful effects that has happened to our children and to our neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Jackson?
Anything that we've done and we've been successful at as a city, we've done as a community. So there is no one entity that can resolve this issue. You know, as I look at the data that is reported to me around, if you just do the basics, just the basics of lead removal in homes, you're over $1 billion. So the magnitude of the problem is significant. And you have to remember that this is just not lead in homes. We had a lead industry, smelting plants, lead that was in gasoline. So if you live next to highways, it's in the ground, it's everywhere. So it's a very serious, and the magnitude of the issue is great. So we need a comprehensive community effort that deals with the public sector, the private sector, and the philanthropic sector. Those things that we have done, but you don't want us to talk about that, but we have done things, and we've done significant things. But those things that we've done are, as Ms. Lewis used to say, is an atomizer on a bonfire. No matter how much you do, it does not impact the true nature and the magnitude of the problem that exists. But I will say this, I do things. I just don't talk about things. I do things.
Mr. Mitchell.
Mayor Jackson, last week your campaign began running a radio ad pointing out Councilman Reed's 3 arrests for driving while intoxicated.
Right.
Your supporters applauded that strategy, but others said they thought it was wrong for you or your campaign to bring that up. Some even went so far to call it beneath the dignity of the office you hold. Mm-hmm. In your mind, why is this a campaign issue, and why a month before Election Day did you decide to bring it up?
Well, I don't. First of all, this is not an issue about the councilman's drinking and driving. That's not the issue. What the issue is about judgment and accepting responsibility and holding themselves accountable for actions. And that's all it's about. If you look at this office, this is not an office that has little or no pressure to it. This is an office where you have to make relevant decisions all the time. You have to do something. And so you have to be responsible for those decisions that you make. And first of all, you have to have good judgment in making them. So it speaks to that, is what it speaks to. It's the qualification of the office. And not only that, when you look at the disease of drunk driving, that's what it is. And so no one is condemning or judging anyone based on that condition. But this is an office of the mayor of the city of Cleveland. And you have to have good judgment, and you have to be responsible. Even in doing this debate and other conversations throughout my engagement with Councilman Reed, he's never accepted responsibility to anything. It's always somebody else's fault. I think that's a trait.
30 seconds.
I did do something. I went back to that table right there called the Cleveland Clinic, and I went and got help. I went to the rooms of AA. So when someone tells you that I didn't do anything, I did do something. I spent 28 days in rehab. I did do something. I did do something. I went to the rooms of AA. I went and talked to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So when he tells you I didn't do something about this problem, and I have faced up to the fact that I made a mistake, not once, not twice, but 3 times. So don't let someone tell you I didn't do something. I did do something. And I'm a better person today because I went to the Cleveland Clinic. I'm a better person today because I went to the rooms of AA. I'm a better person today because my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, helped me. So I did do something.
This is a question for both candidates. The National Initiative for Building Community Trust and Justice boils down trust-building interventions between police and the communities they serve into 3 categories: enhanced procedural justice, reduction of implicit bias, and reconciliation. Mayor Jackson, how are you fostering reconciliation?
Reconciliation is something that is a very interesting conversation and initiative because, first of all, you have to have parties who are willing to reconcile as opposed to just continue the debate of their differences. So in order to do that, you have to create an environment where the parties will have free and open and honest dialogue with each other. And one of the things that I've been criticized quite extensively about, but I constantly still will move in that direction, is around the use of dirt bikes and the constant conflict between police and people who ride dirt bikes. There is no reconciliation there because there's a constant tension, right? So you have to create the dialogue. You have to create the ability for people to work with each other, have an open and free conversation. And that's what part of what that is about. So you have to do things in order for that to happen. The other part of reconciliation is to, people have to admit. They have to admit their shortcomings or the fact that they even may have been wrong. And if the failure to own up to the fact that you have some responsibility of your own to this tension is not going to work. So people have to do that. So I think working with the police, working with the community in a way that allows for an open and free dialogue and personal interaction between them, particularly those who the police would come into contact with on an adversarial way, is very key.
Councilman Reed, what would you do besides adding more officers to foster reconciliation?
Well, I think it's called a conversation. See, when I say add new officers, everybody jumps to the new officer component of it. But I say I add 400 brand new community-based police officers. Officers that will walk the beat and ride the bike and go talk to Ms. Brown on her front porch and talk to her and get offered a lemonade. You got Officer Drummond back there, Chief Drummond. He knows how to be a community police officer. You look at our chief, Chief Calvin Williams. He knows how to be a community police officer. Community policing is not driving around in the black and white from call to call to call. It is getting out. From call to call to call.
Right, all right. Right on time. Councilman, right on time. That was pretty good.
That was pretty good. I called that one right on. It is about not going from call to call to call. But it's about sitting down and have a conversation. That's why on the campaign trail, I've given out my cell phone to the people in the community. I've also said every Saturday for 2 hours at a bare minimum, anybody who wants to come see the mayor of the city of Cleveland can be able to come see the mayor in the city of Cleveland for 2 hours or more and talk about the problems. Why? Because if Toby Cosgrove, the head of Cleveland Clinic, wanted to come see the mayor, with or without an appointment, he could come see the mayor. If Beth Moody wanted to come see the mayor, head of Key Bank, with or without an appointment, she could come see the mayor. Why can't Ms. Jones in West Park come see the mayor because of the problems in her neighborhood? Why can't Mr. Jones come see the mayor because she can't get her lights put on in CPP in Mount Pleasant? So it's about opening up. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm going to do different than this one. You know, in closing, I'll just say, all you got to do is look. He talks about the reconciliation and the dialogue and the conversation, but he closed down Public Square without one community meeting. Without one. That's not reconciliation. That's not sitting down and talking to the other parties. That's one man that believes that he didn't get elected mayor, that he got elected a dictator. And that's not going to happen under my watch.
That's your time, sir. Thank you for the moment of levity. Chris Quinn.
Jackson, you raised the issue of the dirt bike, so let's explore that a little bit because it's an issue on which you both vigorously disagree. When you introduced that proposal a year or so ago, you did it saying it would open a conversation with a population that doesn't have an ear in City Hall. Councilman Reed has opposed it as an unworkable plan that would waste $2+ million. Could you elaborate on why you think it's a good idea, and then could you come back and explain your opposition to it and how you would reach out to that same community? So,
well, first of all, let's understand that culture, that dirt bike culture, is not going away. And if you go all over this country, it is happening all over this country. And every urban center is struggling with how do we deal with this. So let's start with the fact that whenever there's dirt bike riding, and particularly if it's blocking up, it's illegal. It's illegal. And it causes problems between the police and the people who ride dirt bikes. Now, the part about reconciliation, creating a dialogue so there's a better understanding and to have some control over it by the riders themselves or the leaders of the group to help control the behavior. That's part of it. The other part of it is an industry, and it's a multi-million-dollar industry. And young people do not have an opportunity to go into that industry. This opens an avenue for them to go into the industry, whether they're as riders and participate in the competitive sport, or in the industry of the repair, the maintenance, and all that has to do around that. So it really is a holistic approach as to how do we deal with something that's not going away and try to move it into a mode that will be proactive and a positive outcome, not only for those who are riding and those who participate in that riding, but also for those who may have conflicts with them, whether they're citizens or the police.
Well, let me be clear. Anybody in this room, anybody listening on the radio, or anybody watching on television, if you want a dirt bike track built in your ward, in your community, and in your neighborhood, you vote for him. Because I'm not going to build a dirt bike track in the city of Cleveland. I'm not going to waste $2.4 million on a dirt bike track that 95% of the people in the city of Cleveland will not use. Let me repeat. I am not going to waste $2.4 million of taxpayer money on a dirt bike track that 95% of the people in the city of Cleveland will not use. And listen to the policy that was used as it relates to these dirt bike tracks. or the dirt bike riders. We're not going to chase them. So now what do we have now? We have dirt bike riders that are now taunting our men and women in blue because we know we're not going to chase them. We don't tell bank robbers when you rob a bank because of this or in between, we're not going to chase you. We don't let rapists get away with raping our women and say we're not going to chase you. Why is it that we let a dirt bike rider come and taunt our brave men and women in blue and say to them, we're not going to chase you. We're going to let you get away with this. You're going to continue to do this. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. So we're going to take the $2.4 million and clean up the park because we have an environmental nightmare down there. Yes, we should clean it up. But the other $1.4 million, if it adds up to the $1 million, we're going to put it back into our recreation centers. We're going to put it back into our neighborhoods where the majority of our people use our recreation centers. The majority of our people use activities and amenities in our neighborhoods. But I guarantee you they do not use a dirt bike track.
Thank you. I'm Rick Jackson, senior host and producer at ideastream. Today we are enjoying the Cleveland mayoral debate between Frank G. Jackson and Zack Reed. We are about to head into the question and answer period. Audience questions were pre-selected this week by the City Club Debate Committee. We will also take one question from social media. If you're listening, you'd like to submit a question for consideration, or if you're here and you'd like to submit a question, please tweet it at the City Club and include the hashtag CLE Mayor Debate. May we have our first question, please, from one of my old broadcast partners.
Hi, Rick. Tom Barra, City Club member and former Channel 3 political reporter. Mayor Jackson, I don't have the verbatim quotes, but I remember several occasions during your time in office you have said you could be judged as a success or failure as a mayor by whether or not Cleveland schools really improved on your watch. Mm-hmm. If the judgment were made today after 3 terms, would you be considered a success or failure? And is your present school's goal to create more good schools and a decent education for a majority of students, or to offer a great education for elite students attending fewer specialty schools? Councilman Reed, are you satisfied with the transformation plan and schools leadership? And would you have a more hands-on role than perhaps Mayor Jackson has had during his time in office in overseeing schools?
Mr. Mayor first.
Let's start off by saying that the issue around school and public education is not just a recent thing. It is decades this discussion has been going on. But again, it goes to what are you going to do about it? It's a challenge, what are we going to do about it? So 5 years ago, we were able to get the Cleveland School Reform Plan. And with that reform plan, we have made significant progress. We can look at graduation rates from 50% to 70-something%. And there are some schools that are some of the best schools in the state of Ohio. But when you look at the system as a whole, the system as a whole still does not do well. It still fails. And that is because, again, because of this is not something new. This is something that's been going on for decades. So there are things that are going on that are not necessarily part of the school system itself that impacts the ability of a child to learn. That is why we're going after the Say Yes program, because the Say Yes program really does a wraparound to identify what are the problems that a child has, and what can we do as the public sector, the private sector, the philanthropic sector to wrap around that child. It's been demonstrated in a couple of communities where this program is in effect that has significantly improved the overall movement of education throughout the system.
Judged by your own standards, if we were to just take the snapshot today, would you be a success or a failure in what's happening?
Well, I think we'd be a C+, whatever that is. You know, I'm not going to say an A. But because we have a way to go. We have a way to go. But I would say a C+, and we're continuing to work on it.
Thank you, sir.
I think, like they say, you can't make up your own facts. You can't call yourself a C+ when the state has called you an F on more than one occasion. I mean, it's a complete failure. And I don't think anybody in this room should be happy. It's all about leadership. And leadership starts at the top. I mean, he's the head of the schools. He appoints the CEO. He appoints the school board. So, I mean, of course it's going to say a C+, but the records indicate that that school system, even when under the new plan, is failing. And now you've dummied it down to say, okay, we wanted to have 59% good schools. That's what they said under the Cleveland plan. Now they've dummied it down now to say we're going to have 18% of excellent schools. From 59 to 18. So I'm telling you, it's all about leadership, people. I mean, this is a good question. And this is a person who, repeating, I'm going to say, that appoints the CEO. He is the head of the school board, the school district in the city of Cleveland. He is. So he appoints the CEO. He appoints the school board. So everything that happens there is a reflection on his leadership. So when he says someone's not doing anything, look at the school district. And you ask yourself, what is he doing about that school district?
Next question, please.
Mayor, Councilman. Kristen Morris, Cleveland Clinic and City Club Board Member. Well-managed cities are magnets for investment. How will each of you plan to foster an environment that builds the confidence of investors and attracts a variety of businesses, and therefore jobs, to the city?
Councilman, you can go first.
Well, I truly believe you attract businesses into a community by making a community safe. I'm going to go back to my good friend right there, Matt Zone. Matt Zone continues to tell us how West 65th Street was the most dangerous census tract in the city of Cleveland. And what did he do? He set up what I believe we've got to set up, Christian. We've got to set up a true public-private partnership. It happened under Voinovich, it happened under White, it happened under Matt Zone. A true public partnership that first believes that we need to have safety first. But you can't have all the violence in a neighborhood and expect people to move in. What do you do when you move into a community? First thing you do, you find out what are the schools, how good are the schools, and you find out whether or not it's safe to live in that community. Businesses do the same exact thing. They're not pioneers. They don't go out and we're just going to be pioneers. We're not going to come into a community that's filled with guns and violence and gangs. So if you want to foster these businesses coming into wards and communities and the neighborhoods, you make those neighborhoods safe. We see the blueprint. It's happening in Tremont. It's happening in Detroit Shoreway. It's happening in Ohio City. It's happening in University Circle. We already have a blueprint on how we get this done to create a true public-private partnership. It starts with safety first.
Mayor Jackson.
Okay. Well, you know, it's very interesting that there's no detail to the plan as to what you do. There's always a conversation about what the problem is. It's very good, and we can all identify the problem. The question is, how are you going to meet those challenges? How are you going to deal with them? You know, it's just like, I would ask the question, where's your plan? Where's your plan to build your wall? You know, your wall. How are you going to build your wall? How are you going to create the environment that allows for investment? I have demonstrated that I've done it. I've done it. I've done it because that's what I do every day. I just don't have a conversation about pointing out misinformation or pointing out faults of other people. Again, it goes to the thing about judgment. It goes to the whole thing about accepting the responsibility. Councilman, in your ward has one of the highest homicide rates. But you then point to this councilman and say what the great work that he did. What did you do in your ward to ensure economic development in your ward? What did you do? You did nothing. You went to the table and fought my people from tearing down homes in your ward. So I have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in your ward to tear down homes. What investment is going to incur in your ward when you won't even take the time to build your own infrastructure, to take care of your own quality of life things? But you can point out everybody else's problem. Man, how are you going to build your wall?
Am I able to respond back to that?
No, I didn't have to respond to your misinformation you gave, all that misinformation you gave. You know, I just sat here and took it.
All right, thank
I
you,
just
Mr.
sat
Jackson.
here and took it, and I didn't have the opportunity to respond, so you
Joe.
do what you do.
Joe Gramps, City Club member and Cleveland resident for the last 5 years and the next 50. The City of Cleveland population has declined since the 1960s. What is your plan to reverse the decline, and in your vision, what would Cleveland look like in the year 2030?
Frank Jackson, year 2030.
The city of Cleveland is already increasing populations, but it's in some parts of the city, not all of the city. So I think when I talk to my planning director, he says we're stabilized. So we're not losing at an accelerated rate. We're kind of stabilized in regards to that. Now what we're doing, we're investing. We're investing in a way that makes that neighborhood, the city of Cleveland, a neighborhood of choice where people want to live, work, play, and do business. And we have demonstrated in many ways how we've done that. The councilman pointed out Detroit Shoreway. We pointed out Tremont. We're putting $65 million in the most distressed areas of the city of Cleveland in order to help underwrite private investments there to ensure that that population gets stabilized and there's growth and wealth created there. So in a great sense, we went from, when I became mayor, I think around 6,000 people downtown to now about 15,000, 16,000 people. So it has to be a concerted effort. It's not a conversation about how do you get something done. It's about what do you do to get something done. And when you do make decisions, you make decisions that aren't political decisions, then that means you're not going to make everybody happy. But they're the right decisions. They're the right decision, and they're the right decision for this city and for the people of this city. And we have to make this city a place where people want to be. But most importantly, we have to take care of the people who are here.
Well, I don't know the last time he's been in Glenville on the northeast side of the city of Cleveland if he believes that this population is growing. He clearly hasn't gone that way. He clearly hasn't gone in other neighborhoods of the city of Cleveland to see the population is dwindling and dwindling. 56,000 people have left since he became mayor of the city of Cleveland. So I don't know where he's been. He's living in a place that I'm not living in because I travel throughout the city. But I want to go back to this issue of this plan, since we talk about I don't have a plan, but he does. What is his plan to stop the poverty in the city of Cleveland? He's been mayor for 12 years. For 12 years, and you know what's happened in those 12 years? The poverty level has gone from 41% to 53% for our children. Where is this plan to stop it? Where is this plan that stops the gang violence that has now erupted throughout every ward and every community in the neighborhood? Where is his plan? Where is this plan to say right now, as we sit in this room, 94 people have already been killed in the city of Cleveland. We are going on 4 consecutive years of 100 plus homicides. Where is this plan to stop it? So when he talks about me not having a plan, he doesn't have a plan because he just sat and said, you don't know what his famous words are. It is what it is. And I'm telling you people that stops on November the 7th. Because the people of the city of Cleveland now have a choice between someone who talks about a plan and someone who has a realistic plan to save our neighborhoods.
Next question comes to us via Twitter.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bashara Addison, and I am a member of the City Club Debate Committee, and we've selected a question via Twitter. And that question is, immigration has been a huge topic nationally and globally. And so as mayors, how will you protect immigrants and refugees in Cleveland? And what potential is there for us to have sanctuary city status?
Mr. Jackson.
Me first. In terms of sanctuary city status, we behave as a sanctuary city. And with our police department, the way in which Global Cleveland operates, all the things that we do, we behave as a sanctuary city. We have not declared that status. I know that there are some who say, well, Mayor, you can do that and be politically correct, but then they don't do the things they need to do to protect immigrants or refugees. So what we do, we behave the right way and we do the right thing. I worked with others in this city and we formed Global Cleveland. And Global Cleveland is primarily for the purpose of standing in lieu of communities, where we used to be when we were had ethnic enclaves where people from other countries would come to their own enclave in the city of Cleveland, and they would help to support them and create the infrastructure for them, for jobs, for businesses, for education, for worship, all those kind of things. Global Cleveland does that in lieu of, because we don't have that same infrastructure anymore. We've signed on to many national things out of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and the thing that Matt Zone is president of. I forget the National League of Cities. We've signed off on many of those initiatives as being supportive of those kind of initiatives that stands in as a position as to how we stand in protection and in promoting immigration and refugees to come to Cleveland.
Well, I think you know, my mom comes from a place called the Show Me State, Missouri. So I know when we get in trouble, she always asks us, you know where I come from? And you tell her, and she says, the Show Me State. You know, mayor of the city of Cleveland, once again, is a powerful position, the most powerful position in the city of Cleveland. I went to the airport. See, because I'm not building a wall. I'm not Donald Trump, and I'm not going to build a wall. I'm not going to fund building a wall. So I stand up to people who are racist and prejudiced, that I believe when they make things, like when they make the immigration laws that they made. So I went to the airport, like other mayors did. Other mayors around the country, when the law went down, they went and stood with the people who were protesting. They went there, like I did when I went to the airport. We went out there in the freezing cold to let Donald Trump know firsthand, we are not going to sit on the sidelines and let people come who have come to this nation and made our nation great, because we're all immigrants, except for our Native Americans. So when we marched from West 25th Street downtown to Public Square, I did that like other mayors did. And what did he do? He sat in his room again and said, it is what it is. You need somebody that's going to show that this office means something, people. It is a powerful office. You can get things done. So when he tells you that I haven't done anything, go ask the people in Ward 2 what I've done. When they gave me 53% of the vote, when he couldn't even get 500 votes in his own ward to get 50% of the people in his own ward to say that he can get 50% of the vote. He couldn't even get 500 people in his own ward to vote for him. And yet I'm the one who doesn't have a plan. I'm the one who doesn't have a vision. You would think after being mayor, the council president, and the council person that he could have at least got 500 votes in his own ward.
Thank you. One of the biggest disagreements you gentlemen have had was over Public Square's bus traffic discussion. Mayor Jackson advocating for bus-free space, Mr. Reed saying the closure was not really about traffic, but about, quote, suburbanites who don't want certain people to come and be on Public Square. So I ask, if you're publicly willing to pit one group of people against another that way, how do you propose the city, under your leadership, and the county can continue to be partners on matters of importance to both?
Well, I don't think you should be pitting people against each other in the first place. I think what happens is that that decision that was made was a wrong decision. And the decision that not only the fact that it was a wrong decision, is the process of how it was made. I mean, one man in one building in one office should not have that much power to be able to shut down a public square without any conversation whatsoever. There was not one community meeting, people. There was not one community conversation, people. There was not one community discussion, people. He walked into the office one day and said, we're going to close down Public Square. Without any conversation. It's not the way you do business. And now today we talk about reconciliation. And now today we talk about dialogue. That right there is a sure example of somebody who's been in that office way too long. Because no one would make a decision of that magnitude that put us in a position to lose federal funding. Look what it took. It took the federal government to come in here and tell us, if you don't open that square up, we're going to take your federal funding away. Not only for this project, but on future projects. That's not the way you do business. You have a conversation, you have a dialogue, and we come to a conclusion. We might not agree all the time, but at least we had a conversation, we had a dialogue, and then there's a decision that's going to be made. We're not going to do what happened on Public Square again.
And to continue that, 90 seconds for Mr. Jackson, do you characterize the eventual reopening of Public Square as a leadership loss, not getting the traffic pattern that you chose to have?
Well, let me first point out that this is classic Zack Reed. Classic Zack Reed. It doesn't matter even when you point out the fact that he'll still say, I didn't do it. Classic, not accepting responsibility. You did say what you said. And you know, it's no different than anything else, that you have to stay at least consistent about what you are doing, and people have to be able to rely on what you're doing. If you're talking about economic development, community development, you're talking about anything, people have to be able to rely on it and not just change whim to whim. What I said during Public Square was not that I wanted it closed, but we needed to do a study as to whether or not it would be to the detriment of RTA as to whether or not it would be closed. And if there was a detriment, how could we rectify or solve that detriment? So RTA and I were going through a process of doing that. It got to the point where it became more of a political issue than it became then a substantive issue. And at the end of the day, it did come down to the federal government saying that they were going to cut off money if the square wasn't open. But the original conversation was not about closing the square or opening the square. It was about would this work? And if it could work, how could we do it? If it caused harm to you, RTA, what could we do to rectify that harm? That was what that conversation was about.
Thank you. I want to commend all of you for holding your applause. You've given us enough time to work with that we're going to gift these gentlemen with closing statements, which was not planned. We'll see how fast they are on their feet. Mayor Jackson, you have 90 seconds to tell us why we should be in your corner.
Well, again, this is about the future of the city of Cleveland. This is not amateur hour. It's not about rookies. This is about, is not about inexperience. This is about how do we move this city forward, and how do we move the people of this city forward. And I have demonstrated over the last 12 years that we have done things and we have moved this city through some very challenging times, whether it was the Great Recession without going into default, whether it was the whole crisis of predatory lending and maintaining our neighborhoods in the best we could. When we looked at the challenge of education, we came together as a community and did those things to address education in a holistic way to create reform, and it's showing and bearing fruit. This is about the future. We have worked, and I have worked, and my administration has worked. And we worked hard every day so that we could position ourselves to have the opportunity to have a bright and a good future. That didn't happen by accident, ladies and gentlemen. That didn't happen by a conversation. That didn't happen by pointing out all the woes of the world and blaming everybody else and not taking accountability or responsibility for what you do. That didn't happen that way. It happened because we put the work in, and that is what it is.
Mr. Reed.
So let me lay out to you what my experience is, since I have no experience. For 11 years, I worked for 2 governors of the state of Ohio. For 4 years, I worked for a legend in San Francisco, Mayor Willie Brown. For 1 year, I worked in the county government, and for 16 years, I've been a council person. When he became mayor, he worked in the prosecutor's office, and then he became a council person, and now he's mayor. I worked in the federal government, the state government, and the county government, and now the city government. So when he tells you I don't have the experience, I have way more experience than he had when he became mayor of the city of Cleveland. But did you hear throughout this entire debate he didn't talk about his record? Did you hear how he didn't defend his record? He talked about it's about the future, but yet he didn't lay out what he was going to do for the future. See, all elections are about the future. So when you talk about what I have not done, go ask the people of Ward 2. When I got Kimson Road done for $11.5 million. When I got A.J. Rickoff done on 146th and Kinsman, and now every school in my ward is brand spanking new, and there's not another council person that can say that. The fact that I got a building on 139th, the county building on 139th, reconstructed for all the city, all the senior responsibilities and all the things that happen with seniors happened in that building. The fact that I built a 40-unit building on 138th and Kinsman, and we leveraged that into the Kinsman Road project, into a $50 million investment in Mount Pleasant. That's what we've done. What did he do with $7 to $8 billion over the last 12 years in leveraging? Look at our wards. It didn't leverage back to our wards. Look at our wards. We're talking about leveraging. Look what he did not leverage.
You got to follow the rules, Councilman.
There you go. Today at the City Club, we've been enjoying the Cleveland mayoral debate between Frank G. Jackson and Zack Reed, and the endorsement of both of them by Matt Zone. Today's debate is the Aaron H. and Ruth S. Zychik Memorial Forum, made possible by gifts from the estate of Mr. and Mrs. Zychik. We appreciate their ongoing support of City Club programming. Additionally, we welcome guests of the many local organizations that purchased tables for today's event. They are listed in your printed program. We appreciate your presence and your support. That brings us to the end of today's debate. Thank you, Mayor Jackson. Thank you, Councilman Reed. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, sir.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on ideastream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Robert Conrad, Cleveland State University, the Chautauqua Institution, the Payne Fund, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.